This is a video game from 2004, an ordinary first-person shooter, the kind of thing you've seen plenty of before, except for one little detail. The entire game, every wall, every monster, every weapon and every note of music is 96 kilobytes. That single file is the whole game. The photo your phone took this morning is about 50 times larger than this entire 3D world, which should not be possible. How do you fit a whole game into a space that small? And why would anyone even try? People have been doing this for about 40 years, and it began, of all places, in piracy. In the early 1980s, home computers landed in ordinary houses, and almost immediately, people started copying software that they hadn't paid for. Games shipped with copy protection, so a certain kind of person made it their mission to break it, to crack the game so it could be copied freely. They were good at it. Cracking took real skill. And just like anyone good at something that they're not supposed to be doing, they wanted credit. So when you launched a cracked game, before it started, a screen would appear. The name of the person or group who broke it. At first it was just text, but text is boring, and these people were show-offs. So the screens got better. Scrolling messages, music, color, animation, effects. A few seconds of pure flexing slapped on top of a pirated game. They were called crack intros. Cracktros. The intros got competitive. Rival groups raced to outdo each other. Which one looked better? Which one pulled off something that the hardware supposedly couldn't do? And for some of them, eventually, the intro became the whole point. So, they cut the game loose. They kept making the intros with nothing attached, just the work made to be passed around and admired by other people who made the same thing. What started out as a crime had turned into a hobby. They called the programs demos. They called themselves the demoscene. One strange thing about the demoscene is that it's almost entirely European. The center of gravity is Finland, Germany, Scandinavia, Poland, and the Netherlands. America had just as many home computers and just as much piracy, and produced almost nothing by comparison. There are two main reasons for that, and they explain a lot about the culture. The first is the machines. In much of Europe, the home computer was one of a few shared models. The Commodore 64 and then later the Amiga. Identical hardware in thousands of bedrooms, so if your demo looked better than mine, it wasn't a better machine doing it, you were just better. That turned the whole thing into a pure contest of skill. The second reason is the phone bill. In America, long-distance calls were cheap, so people just sent their work down the phone line from home. In Europe though, calling the next city over cost a fortune, so if you wanted to share your demos, swap ideas, and settle who was actually best, you had to physically go there, get on a train, and bring your computer. So they did. They called these gatherings parties. A demo party is an odd thing. A few hundred to a few thousand people, mostly programmers, in one hall for a weekend. Computers wall to wall, and at the front, a giant screen. Because a party isn't only a meetup, it's a competition. You bring the demo you spent months on and it gets shown on the big screen in front of everyone. Then everyone votes. These contests are called compos. Win one and the people whose opinion you actually care about now know your name. For most people, most of the time, that's the whole reward. This is a culture built entirely on the respect of people who can tell exactly how hard the thing you did was, which is why they started making the rules harder on purpose. The small size wasn't always a choice. In the beginning, it was just the reality. A crack intro had to fit whatever space was left on the disk, and the machines almost had no memory to begin with. The space you had was the space you had. But the hardware kept growing, and eventually the limits that used to make this hard simply went away. You could pack a demo with enormous files and let the machine grind through them. The challenge was gone. So the scene put the limit back on purpose and wrote it into the rules. The famous category is the 64K intro. The whole demo, everything, every visual, all the music, had to fit inside of 64 kilobytes. And then a harsher category, the 4K intro. 4096 bytes for all of it. To be clear what that means, a single letter of plain text takes up about 1 byte. So 4 kilobytes is roughly 4,000 letters. A page or two of writing and nothing else. No pictures, no sounds, just the letters. And out of that, somehow comes out this. A flight over a mountain range with a soundtrack in less space than the email you ignored this morning. Which puts us back on the question from the start. How? How do you fit a mountain range into 2 pages of text? Well, you don't. Think about a tree. A full-grown tree is enormous. If you had to write down the position of every branch and every leaf, it would take a staggering amount of information. You can never fit a tree in your pocket. But you can fit a seed in your pocket. A seed doesn't contain a tree, it contains the instructions for building one. Give it what it needs, soil, water, light, and time, and it will build the whole tree itself, leaf by leaf, out of almost nothing. That's the trick. A demo doesn't store the finished world, it stores the seeds. Instead of saving a picture of a rusted metal wall, they save the short mathematical recipe that produces one. Instead of saving a 3D monster, they save the steps. Start with a cube, stretch it here, fold it there. Instead of recording music, they save the notes and a description of the instruments. And they let the machine play it live. None of the world is in the file, only the instructions for growing it. And when you launch the game, that's exactly what happens. The computer reads the seed and grows the whole thing. Every surface, every shape, and every sound, right then and there in front of you. Which is why these things often sit on a loading screen that feels far too long for such a tiny file. It's not loading, there's almost nothing to load. It's building. The tree is growing, and that growth takes a moment. But a seed still needs somewhere to grow. A seed is tiny. The tree it grows is not. Take that shooter from the opening. Once it's actually running, once it's finished building itself, it's using a few hundred megabytes of memory. The grown tree is full size. It was never small, it just arrived small, folded up into little instructions and then unfolded once it's loaded. Which is where that Gothic shooter comes back in. In April 2004, at a demo party in Germany, a small German group called The Product entered Krieger into a competition for games that fit in 96 kilobytes. Inside that sliver of space, they built a working 3D engine, lighting that reacts to every torch in real time, shadows that geometry actually casts, bump mapped surfaces, an enemy that hunts you, and a fully synthesized soundtrack and sound effects. For a sense of scale, that same year, a game called Doom 3 came out, and it was treated as a technical landmark. Some of the most advanced lighting and shadow work in any game at the time. Doom 3 shipped on 3 CDs. Installed, it took up around 2 gigabytes. Krieger runs on a lot of the same ideas. The same kind of real-time lighting, the same kind of shadows. two games in the same year doing similar things on screen. One of them needed 2 gigabytes, the other needed 96 kilobytes, thousands of times smaller, for a world that looks like it belongs in the same decade. People assumed there had to be a trick, that Windows was doing the real work behind the scenes, but it wasn't. One of the developers later spelled it out. The engine, the textures, the lighting, the music, all of it was their own code. The only thing they didn't make themselves was the menu font. It was Arial. To be fair, it's not really a finished game. It's one short level, permanently stuck in beta, and it eats memory the moment it starts building itself. It was a stunt. A few people answering a question that only this scene would bother to ask. How much of a world can you fold into nothing? But the people who made it and the trick they pulled off weren't going to stay underground much longer. A scene like this is almost a perfect school. Difficult problems, no money, and an audience that can only be impressed by skill. Spend your teenage years forcing beautiful graphics out of hardware that shouldn't allow it, and you turn into exactly the kind of programmer the games industry is desperate to hire. So a lot of them left, and you've played what they made next. Some of the people behind Future Crew, one of the most famous demo groups in the early 90s, went on to co-found Remedy Entertainment, the studio behind Max Payne, Alan Wake, and Control. 4 members of a Swedish group called The Silent founded DICE, the studio behind Battlefield, and the designer who drew the original Angry Birds came up through the demo scene as well. The same instinct, do more with less, shaped a whole generation of games that you've actually played. And the specific trick, growing textures from recipes instead of storing them, didn't disappear either. The idea grew up. Other people built proper professional tools around it, and now it's used across modern games, film, and visual effects. It's ordinary now. The thing Krieger did in a corner in 2004 is, in a tamer form, part of how big-budget art gets made today. So the underground that started in pirated games, built for insiders and seen by almost no one, had been shaping the mainstream from the outside the entire time, which makes where it ended up almost impossible to believe. Starting in 2020, something happened that the people who started this would have found ridiculous in 1985. Finland officially recognized the demo scene as part of its cultural heritage, the first time any country had granted that status to a purely digital culture. Then Germany did the same in 2021. Then Poland, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Sweden, France, and Norway. 8 countries so far, with more in progress. And there's a campaign behind it. The art of coding, pushing for the final step. Getting the demo scene onto UNESCO's list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. That's the same program that safeguards things like traditional crafts, folk music, and ancient rituals. The demo scene would be the first piece of digital culture to ever join them. A culture that began by bolting graffiti onto pirated video games, written into the same record as folk dances and traditional crafts. And not everyone in the scene is happy about it. For some, it's pride, plain and simple. One scener put the feeling like this: "Hey mom, look, UNESCO says it wasn't all stupid what I did." Others aren't so comfortable with it. The whole point of this thing was that it was theirs, underground, made for each other, judged by each other, owned by nobody. And for some of them, being put behind glass in a museum feels less like a trophy and more like being told that the interesting part is over. For the record, it's not. The scene is still going. The parties still run. People are making demos right now. Some on 40-year-old machines, some inside a web browser, Some in sizes that make 4 kilobytes look roomy, still folding whole worlds into nothing. For an audience of people who can tell exactly how hard it is. The photograph you took this morning? It's still bigger than any of them.